If you have to roll a 2+ to charge, don't roll a 1.
Today, I'll be ranking these Spires dueling characters. Before I do so, I did want to add one thing about my 100 Kingdom ranking list for dueling characters. An astute viewer pointed out that I did not include the Theist Priest Divine Sanction spell, which turns him into a dueling character. It does not. I crunched the numbers between the Theist Priest with Divine Sanction against the Imperial Officer, which is the lesser of the non-caster duelers in 100 Kingdoms, and the Imperial Officer, as weak as he is, still beats the Theist Priest on average. So sorry to tell you folks out there, if you're trying to build a Theist Priest duelist, don't do it. It's a complete trap. Onto some Spires dueling characters. As usual, we have the Biomancer and the Ferromancer. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the Biomancer and the Ferromancer and stick them in D tier. They are casters, which means they're not good at dueling. Now, granted, if you take the Biomancer and Ferromancer and look at their abilities, their Ferromancies or Biomancies, there are one or two in here that you can use, such as Harvest Essence, which will give the Biomancer a +1 attack or a +1 to his defense during a duel. Who cares? Don't do it. Trashed. Get him out of here. Remember, this is not a list of the best overall characters, which eventually I'll get back to doing. This is just a list of the best duelers. We're going to take a look at the High Clone Executor. Now, keep in mind, for my testing, I did build a couple different versions of each of these characters, and I pitted them against each other. And before I get into the 3 dueling characters for Spires, I did want to mention one honorable thing here. Many of you may be aware of an ability that the Spires have called Adrenal Surge, which basically gives you a +2 clash and a +4 to your attack characteristic. And once you do this, the character dies. So if the Mimetic Assassin has Adrenal Surge and the character stand participates in either a duel or clash action, this ability goes off, makes the character a little stronger, and then the character instantly dies. Now, there are probably meme army builds that you can do this with the Mimetic Assassin and cloned redundancy, but that's not the list we're talking about today, nor the character builds we're talking about today. My point is this. This Mimetic Assassin with Venom and Adrenal Surge and Disorienting Strikes is the best offensive Mimetic Assassin you can make, and he still loses to the High Clone Executor and the Lineage Highborn pretty soundly as well. Basically, the Mimetic Assassin with the Adrenal Surge is meant to kill an opposing enemy character in a single action, and then he dies. If he cannot kill the opposing character in a single action, then there really is no point in making the Mimetic Assassin Adrenal Surge build. And that is one thing I've learned while conducting my tests, is that defensive dueling characters are infinitely better than offensive dueling characters so far. So what do I mean by that? If I have 2 offensive dueling characters, on average, whichever offensive dueling character is slightly better is going to win, okay? But if I have a defensive dueling character and the highest level offensive dueling character possible, the offensive dueling character will not kill the defense dueling character, even over time. Now, keep in mind that this is just internal testing between the Spires characters and themselves. I am not currently testing dueling characters outside of their faction. So the 100 Kingdom characters fought against each other. The Spires characters are going to fight against each other, so on and so forth for all the factions. And then later on, I'll have some sort of King of the Hill tournament where all the best dueling characters are going to fight to see who is the top dueling character. So all that in mind, any Adrenal Surge build character for Spires does not beat the defensive dueling Spire character builds at all. So the Mimetic Assassin, believe it or not, is actually gonna go into C tier. I know that may piss a lot of you off that the Mimetic Assassin is in C tier, but the Mimetic Assassin cannot beat the Lineage Highborn or the High Clone Executor. Just, he can't do it. It's impossible. So he is just not a good dueler within the faction, okay? And if the only characters that the Mimetic Assassin can beat are casters, well, he's C tier. I can't put him in D, but he's definitely in C. Let's look at the High Clone Executor. What makes defensive builds so good? The High Clone Executor comes in at 180 points, and The High Clone Executor is actually going to use the Warlord Supremacy ability from the Ferromancer, Suppress Survival Instincts. While this character stand is on the battlefield, all friendly regiments within 12 inches of this character stand may re-roll failed resolve tests. This supremacy ability is always considered to be active. So assuming the Ferromancer is your Warlord and the High Clone Executor is within 12 inches, the High Clone Executor will actually be able to re-roll his resolve over here. Okay, which makes him very defensive. And it's not a stretch to not have a High Clone Executor next to a Ferromancer. Now, I did not grant the same Warlord bonus to the Mimetic Assassin and Lineage Highborn, since the Lineage Highborn's Warlord ability allows her or the Mimetic Assassin to have up to 3 mutations, which is really good. So the High Clone Executor is using the supremacy of the Ferromancer, and the Mimetic Assassin and Lineage Highborn are both using the supremacies of the Lineage Highborn. Some of you may be noticing that for the Mimetic Assassin, I only have 2 mutations with a Disorienting Strike, because a 3rd mutation actually is 100% irrelevant when the Mimetic Assassin's only goal is to kill you once and then die. If I give him any of the defensive mutations, they're completely irrelevant, especially since he comes with Quicksilver Strike. The Mimetic Assassin against the Lineage Highborn and the High Clone Executor goes first, does not need any defensive mutations, and then dies. And even I believe the Venom is redundant because of purity of purpose. And then you may think, well, then the Mimetic Assassin doesn't need the Lineage Highborn's triple mutation if all he's going to take is Adrenal Surge. That's true. The Ferromancer's supremacy is still defensive. Back to the High Clone Executor. The High Clone Executor has Cleave 1, Flawless Strikes. He ignores 1 failed defense. He ignores 1 wound, has 5 defense, and reroll resolves once. And you may be wondering, where is his defense of 5 coming from? Well, all of the dueling characters which have the adaptive evolution mutation is given 3 rounds to adapt, and then they duel. So round 1, they come on the board. Round 2, they get closer. And round 3, when the card is drawn, they get their final 3rd boost, and then they duel. And this was true for any of the characters I gave the adaptive evolution to. Now, that's still just defense of 4, but keep in mind that the High Clone Executor comes with an ability that gives the regiment that he's in Bastion. So the regiment that he's in will activate first, granting him Bastion, and then when he duels, his defense will be a 5. Just like with 100 Kingdoms, if characters come with an ability that gives their regiment a boost, the character will then gain the advantage of that ability. So I'm not giving the High Clone Executor Bastion because another regiment had Bastion. I'm giving him Bastion because he can grant Bastion to the regiment that he is in. But he will gain that ability. So once again, what does that mean for the High Clone Executor? That means the High Clone Executor against every single dueling character I made for the Spires at most takes 1 wound a round. Being that he has 5 wounds, that means he'll last for up to 5 rounds worth of fighting. Yes, that's true. Even against a Mimetic Assassin that's blowing him up with Adrenaline Surge, the High Clone Executor still just takes 1 wound. This guy is hyper defensive. Now, if you didn't want to give him the Bastion and keep him only at Resolve 4, he'll take maybe 2 wounds at most. The ability to ignore a defense roll and ignore a wound roll and re-roll all resolves once is huge. That means the High Clone Executor is an A-list dueler. His offensive punch is not that great, but his defensive ability is amazing. I think that this guy is going to be one of the top duelers in the game. But we still have 1 more to go. That's the Highborn lineage. We'll just put her in B right now. And the Highborn lineage basically has the exact same mutations as the High Clone Executor. Now these mutations, enhanced reactions, lets you gain Tenacious, which lets you ignore 1 defensive roll, and a Blade of Flesh, which lets you ignore the 1st wound roll. The Lineage Highborn also has Adaptive Evolution, Enhanced Reactions, and a Blade of Flesh, making her defensive as well. Now, when you pair the Lineage Highborn up against the High Clone Executor, she also deals him 1 wound total, but she also takes 1 wound. So they're pretty even. With the Lineage, we use the Adaptive Evolution to bring her Clash up to a 4, and the Lineage Highborn has Disorienting Strikes, which brings the High Clone Executor's Clash down. Since both the Lineage Highborn and High Clone Executor deal each other on average 1 damage, and the Lineage Highborn has 6 wounds, and the High Clone Executor has 5 wounds, over time, the Lineage Highborn will win just barely, which means the Lineage Highborn is going to be just in front of the High Clone Executor. Once again, their offensive capability holds them back from being S tier, as their offensive capability is lacking with only Cleave 1. So within the Spires faction fighting amongst themselves, the casters are in the D tier. The highly offensive Deadly Mimetic Assassin can't even scratch the paint on a High Clone Executor and Lineage Highborn, so he completely fails at C. Even making a defensive build, he still fails at dealing with either one of them in combat. And the High Clone Executor is bested by the Lineage Highborn by a single wound on average. When the factions start fighting each other, I suspect the Mimetic Assassin, the High Clone Executor, and the Lineage Highborn are actually going to be high dueling characters. But what you're seeing here are 3 deadly dueling characters fighting amongst each other. So your brain is thinking, oh, just A and C tier? Yes, within themselves. These are like 3 prize fighters being ranked 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. But we're ignoring the rest of the rankings at the moment. And that sums it up for the Spires dueling characters. Let me know what I did wrong in the comment section, and let me know, more importantly, what I did right in the comment section. And remember, if you have to roll a 2+ to duel a Mimetic Assassin, just re-roll your defense.